Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. You guys know who I am. I'm Dr. Angela Butts-Chester, and you know what I like to do on the show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time today with David John Reedman, and we'll be talking about his book, A Man's Greatest Challenge, Being a Father. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, David. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark TV.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So glad that you are here. Now, as is the tradition here on the show, we always give our guests an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. There may be some folks out there that are unfamiliar with you or with your work. So first question for you, what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm happily married to my wife, Elaine. I have 3 great children and 6 great grandchildren. My background is I'm a secondary school teacher, a minister. I've been involved a lot in youth counselling and youth training and leadership in Australia, America, and South Africa.
Love it. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that that was a way in which you could reach a different group of people, that you could share your information with the masses?
I was encouraged to become an author by my children. There were a lot of things I've done in the area of working with fathers, and my kids kept saying to me, Dad, you need to write this down and make it more available to people. And so a few years ago, I had cancer. And while I was doing that, my kids said, this is the prime opportunity. And so that's when I wrote the book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as a fellow cancer survivor, congratulations for being here today. God does great and amazing things.
He certainly does.
And as someone who is also in ministry as well, I find that those that have been called to ministry, we always want to share. We want to bring people to their greater selves to share that which God has shared with us. So I applaud you on that. I couldn't agree with you more there. Now, the title of your book, A Man's Greatest Challenge, Being a Father. Why did you feel that those words were the proper arrangement of words, if you will, to entitle this book?
I think I've encouraged or met people over the years who've, as men, have tried to achieve a whole variety of things. And the sad thing is I've seen many of them actually lose their own children and families. And so to me, as a minister and as a father, my kids are, in a sense, my first congregation or church. My kids are my first responsibility. And it's a challenge. It doesn't come easy these days. Fathering is not an easy task. And I think many men have, it's very easy to father a child, but actually to raise a child is a different story altogether. And that was where the title of the book came from. I think it's a great challenge.
Absolutely. And I can definitely understand that. And I'm really glad that not only are people starting to write more books for those who enjoy reading for self-help sake, for information's sake, but more men, I'm finding, are also sharing on social media and letting people know that there are dads out there that are involved, and this is what it looks like, just in case you're not familiar with that. So I do applaud you and find that this is definitely needed. Now, as far as the ideal reader is concerned, I know that many times an author will write a book in a way that a particular group of people may be targeted. For example, this book may be written for seniors. So of course it's written in a vernacular that's familiar to the age group, or it's for youth. And of course it's written in a way that's for them. Did you find that your book hits a particular aged father, or would this be for a father of any age, be it that they're in their 20s all the way up to someone perhaps in their 50s or 60s?
I think I've written the book to appeal to fathers at any age. It was particularly focused, I suppose, on young fathers. because there are so many young men that I encounter these days that are raising families or seeking to raise families who had no father themselves. So they really have no idea of what is involved and some of the principles and things can apply. It was also written, I suppose, to an older group of fathers who are maybe somewhere in the journey and finding sort of as their children maybe come to teenage years or whatever, that there are some things that they just need to come back and revisit. And the other group that I was looking to encourage was people whose children have left home, who may now be either grandfathers or have the opportunity, maybe in a church or in some other community, to actually be able to input into the lives of other people. I think too many men sort of, well, I've raised my children, that's it. But the reality is being a father is a task you continue until the day you die.
I couldn't agree with you more there. I know that in women's ministry, many times we talk about that latter stage, that empty nest phase, as we call it for women's ministry, where it's like, well, wow, my children aren't in the home anymore. What do I do now? You know? And it's also a very pivotal point many times in people's marriages, because they're not just mom and dad anymore. Now they're husband and wife. And what do you do with this newfound sense of space in your relationship? So you are so right there. Now, for many authors, they write their books in a way that really helps guide the reader along, if you will. They perhaps put the book in chapters or sections in that we should read chapter 1 before reading chapter 2. Others will say, no, it's kind of reader's choice. You can pick up the book and start anywhere. Go through the table of contents. If it interests you, start there. Is there a best way to read your book?
I think the best way to read it is to read it as it's written, chapter by chapter, because I've outlined a couple of foundations that are essential, I think, to build any family or to build any marriage that are important. And then I've spoken about a number of principles which are in some ways sequential, but also they're repeated again and again and again. And so starting off, one of the important principles is just simply talking to our children, talking to our wife, our partner. After that, we go on to teaching, where we're explaining the things we've taught. We go on to training, which is actually working with our children about the things we've talked about and explained to them, but this is how you do it, and sharing our lives. So I think it's best read sequentially, but it's something also that you can always, I find myself, go back over and over again, maybe specific chapters or just the process of beginning again, just to help me along the way.
Now, would you say that your book is also a good read for perhaps that young man out there, that new father that says, I was raised by a father. My father was in the home. My parents were married. However, my dad was absent, be it that it was illness, work, or they just weren't too involved in their children. Would your book be okay for that young man to read as well?
Most definitely. I think a lot of people, I grew up in a strong family and I have a great dad. My dad's still alive, he's 96. But there are things as I grew up and began to work with my children, began to work with other people in ministry and in schools and in youth situations, I became aware there were things that my dad didn't do well. And that wasn't to criticize him, but it was just simply because he didn't know any better. He was just following what his father had done. And so I think no matter, even if we do have a father, there is certainly a lot we can learn. And I think the book encourages people, gives them some ideas, but also encourages them to keep on learning and learning from other people.
Oh, you said such an important thing there, and that is that many times a parent didn't do something not because they didn't want to, but they simply did not know. They were doing that which they were taught. And I think that each generation needs to kind of have that space and make room for that forgiveness, if you will, and that perhaps your mother, your father, both your grandparents just did not know. And the world is so different now. So there are some things that simply were not given to even apply to today's times. I think we're learning how to deal with a different generation that is exposed to different things. But like you said, those basics, those fundamentals still hold true. I love it. I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, it is time for us to take a break. But before we do, David, could you please remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
The book is A Man's Greatest Challenge, Being a Father. It's available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And you can get in touch with me on our website, www.amansgreatestchallenge.com.
I love it. All righty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
There's something I need to tell you. This relationship isn't working. It isn't good for me. I'm breaking up with you.
It's not me, it's you. I became dependent on you. And you were always there for me, even when I was at my worst.
But I didn't realize the damage you were doing.
You created a toxic environment. Not just for me, but others too. You were suffocating me.
We're just no longer compatible. Also, there's one more thing. I met someone else.
I'm respected in public. I'm making friends. I feel like I can breathe again.
That's how I deserve to be treated.
我们书店结束了。
तुम फिर से कभी नहीं मुझे दुख दोगे।
Ni siquiera te necesito.
Parce que j'ai une autre option.
And it's a healthy relationship.
Are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. So, David, my next question for you is, and it deals with a portion of the title of your book. Now, before I ask the question, here's my disclaimer that I say on TV and radio. If you want to know how the story ends, you gotta buy the book. So, of course, I don't expect for you to give us the all, but let me ask you about that greatest challenge part. I'm sure there are some men out there that says, you know what, David, I'm going through a lot. I have several challenges. So how did you determine which challenges you would include in the book, and how did you choose to address them?
I think, to me, one of the biggest challenges that a man faces, or any person faces, is learning to understand the power of the words that we speak. I came across many people over the years, young people, and I can think of experiences in my own life where someone said something and that changed positively or negatively the course of my life. And I think just simply helping men to understand that there are a lot of things that are involved in a family, and certainly love has to be a foundation to any successful marriage or family. But then beyond that, I think it's the words that we speak and the significance of those every single day. And so I focused on that before I started talking about any principles in the book. I think the other area of challenge is to realize the challenges that men face personally. I raised the point this way. I think the greatest challenge in becoming a father, the greatest challenge is me. And dealing with issues maybe in my life that consciously or unconsciously are affecting the life of my family. And so I focused on just 5 things that I think men need to understand. We're often challenged by other people. We feel intimidated. We can be challenged by areas of compromise or addictions in our lives, by disobedience, by maybe apathy. And I think unfaithfulness, which is not just speaking about the area of divorce and family breakdowns, but just simply not keeping our word. And so for me, the greatest challenge is how can I develop my life more and more in order that I can positively affect my wife and my children.
Oh, that was such a great answer. Thank you so much for that. And I think that when we sit down and have open and honest conversation with each other, especially woman to woman, but of course man to man, and be allowed to talk about those vulnerable moments or those things that you simply don't know. It is such a great thing. And especially when it's intergenerational, when grandfather is able to spend time not only with son, but with grandson as well. Because I have found in our own family that many times the grandchildren have great talks with their grandparents, simply because the parent isn't around in that moment, or the grandparent is sharing from their perspective, and that child feels that they're not being criticized. And that is really, I think, important as well, is that there's conversation without the criticism many times, but that positive encouragement is still there. Now, you mentioned something, and that is the principles that you go over. Now, of course, I don't expect for you to mention them all here today, but what are some of the principles that you discuss in the book that make for a more effective father?
The principles that I went through were the way in which we pass information on, whether we be a parent or even as a teacher, is we start by talking. We're talking about the things, the values and things that are important to us. We're just simply talking with our children, building conversation. We then go into teaching. It's not just simply what I say, but what does it mean? And that's age appropriate in a sense. As children go up in the area of, say, sexuality and so on, what we say to our 3-year-old as to where babies come from, and what we say to a teenager is a very different story. Then there's the training, there's the getting down alongside and getting involved, a little bit like a coach, I think, in terms of just working with our kids and helping them, whatever it happens to be. I know myself, my father was very handy with his hands, and I can remember the times of just getting out there and Dad would show you how to use a plane, how to use a saw and things like that. And then I think a missing thing in many lives, in many families, is a process of transferring where we share ourselves with our children. So it's not just, this is what Dad has said, and this is what it means, and this is how you do it. But hey, this was my journey. These were the successes I had. These were the mistakes I made. And that openness or vulnerability to our children, I think, helps them to realize that life is a journey, and it helps them to open their lives up to us. And then there comes that point of time where we've talked, we've gone through things, we've trained them, we've transferred information. We just have to allow transformation to take place. And it's like a seed. We can plant all the right seeds, but we've just got to allow them time to grow. And in the midst of that, we're just simply doing the things that we've done over and over again with our kids, and just allowing time to take on a process and bring transformation to their lives.
Absolutely. And I like how you said, just planting those seeds. We think many times of planting seeds with all the other things that we do with our financial endeavors or with our business choices, but we're also planting seeds in the relationships and with our children as well. So I couldn't agree with you more there. Now, I want to ask you a question that some may view as being old-fashioned, and not saying that you necessarily address this in your book, but as one in ministry, I think that you will understand where I'm coming from with this question. I know that as a woman of a particular age, I remember being a child where during the holidays, the genders would kind of go their separate ways after holiday dinner. You had the time of coming together, the meal, the watching of whatever sport you were supposed to watch that day. And then the men would kind of retire to the den. The women would go to the salon or to the parlor and have gender specific talks, right? Do you find that is still helpful in today's society, in today's times, or should we start to mingle a little bit more than past generations have?
I think there's areas where it is still important that sons mix with their fathers and daughters mix with their mums, because I think there are things that are transferred and some conversations that maybe they feel more comfortable having when they're with either the mum or their dad. I do think, though, that sometimes we forget, and I think maybe men find it difficult, particularly girls, their whole idea of self-esteem comes largely from their father more than their mother. And I think sometimes because men haven't been women and haven't gone through all those experiences, sometimes the fathers sort of back off and kind of, as the girls grow up, they kind of sort of leave that more to the mother. But I think one thing I've become aware of, because I do have a son and 2 daughters, is that my input into the lives of my girls, particularly as they came into their teenage years, to them was more significant than their mum's input. And so just as a practical thing for myself, the very first date either of my daughters went on was the date I took them on, because I wanted them to know how they should be treated by a man correctly. But I think there are areas, I know my son, he was involved in volleyball for many years, and I took him backwards and forwards, and if he drove in the car, we had lots of great conversations about the things that he was wanting to talk about, but he most probably wouldn't have raised in front of his mum or sisters.
That is so true. And when you mentioned that first date, I smiled, because it's like, yeah, my dad took me on my first date, and it was just all of the things that you kind of see over the years, how chivalrous your dad is for your mom, and now it's your day, that this is going to be all about you, and you really and truly do remember it. And I know that many times a dad may joke on social media and say, I brought her first lobster dinner, it won't be you, so now I've set the bar kind of high. You'll have to spoil my daughter or take care of my daughter really well, so you're right. Having that foundation, hearing it come from your dad really and truly is important. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, that kind of leads me to the next question. And I'm pretty sure that there are some dads out there that have had that difficulty in making that transition, especially from their sons or their daughters, from being those little kids to being that young adult. How should men think about dealing with those challenging times as a dad, from one aspect of their children's lives to the next phase or stage in their lives?
I think it's learning. If you've gone through the processes of training, teaching your kids and so on along the journey, if you've built those relationships with them, I know my 2 girls both made this comment to me: Dad, we realize when we choose to get married, it's our choice, but we do want your input. And I think it's because you've built up that relationship with your children in the younger years. And then as they grow up, learning to take your hands off a little bit, but by maintaining those relationships, you are able to keep the door open, and you're able to speak into their lives. I think for me also, that journey, I think being a father is not something you learn and then that's it. It's something you're constantly learning. And so for myself and my wife, as our children grew up, we read books, or we went to seminars or various things like that, where we could learn from other people who'd gone through that transition or change, find out what they did, and sort of put that into practice in our own lives. And I think the importance of constantly learning and in a sense, keeping up to date is really important in those processes and transitions.
Absolutely. And, with us being in the time period in which we are right now, there are things that the next generation is experiencing that no other generation has experienced prior to. Though we're not dealing with the pandemic anymore, thank God for that. I remember my paternal grandparents all lived through the original pandemic, the Spanish flu, or the pandemic of 1918. So, it really was a time of learning, a time where you're able to gather together. When we talk about family and how important each role is, I think we need to kind of go back to that and understand that every person really and truly has something to share, and that person is a gift to our family unit. Just sit down and talk and just see what they can share, and then you can use it however you need to use it. I love that. I love that. Well, last question for you, and that is, if there is one thing that you want for a reader of your book to take away, what is the hope that you wish for them to take away having read your book?
I think that my hope would be that wherever you are in your journey as a new father coming into that, as a father who is, their children are sort of in the early childhood years, or primary school years, as we would call them in South Australia, that wherever you are in the journey, firstly, you are making a positive difference in the lives of your children. And secondly, you can do better, but it's not from the point of view of you need to, must do, whatever, but you can do better. And in doing so, while there's work involved, while there's effort involved, there is also a joy and a reward that comes back. And that, in the long run, I know the kids' cards I get from my kids on Father's Day and things like that. Now, you look back and you think, it was worth all the effort I put in. And so I'd encourage fathers, wherever they're at in their journey, I think there's things in there that can encourage and inspire them. Hey, there's more I can do, not from the sense of I need to strive or whatever, but there's more I can do. And I'm the one, in the sense, that does reap a reward afterwards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is such a great piece of advice. Continue to move forward. And as you move forward, you have just that many more stories and pieces of information to share with those who follow behind. I couldn't agree with you more. I love it. Well, David, it is a time for us to ask the last question, and that is, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? How do we stay in contact with you? Because we are out of time, but I want to make sure that they are reminded one last time.
Copy of my book is A Man's Greatest Challenge, Being a Father. It's available from Amazon or wherever books are sold, and you can stay in touch on my website, which is www.amansgreatestchallenge.com.
David Reedman, thank you again for being a guest here on Daily Spark TV. I have enjoyed my time with you. Thank you for sharing your book with us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And viewers, thank you for spending time with me here today as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it with us today, and I thank you for doing so. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hi, do you have something to share? Be a guest. Want to sponsor an episode? Visit drangela.chester.com. Thanks again for watching Daily Spark TV.